What happens when love is tested by power, greed, and time itself? The Aldridge Legacy will shock you. Mason Aldridge's life had begun as a solitary pursuit of success, but the moment Ava entered his world, everything shifted. What started as an unusual arrangement had blossomed into a partnership built on trust, resilience, and love. Their marriage marked not only a new chapter in Mason's personal life, but also a redefinition of what success meant to him. For decades, Mason had measured his worth in numbers, profits, innovations, and business deals. But now, worth had a new meaning. The laughter of his daughter Lily echoing through their penthouse, the warmth of Ava's presence beside him each evening, and the deep calm that came from knowing he no longer faced the world alone. Mason's empire, Axiom Innovations, continued to expand beyond borders. It became a beacon of technological progress, pushing humanity closer to a future once imagined only in science fiction. Yet, even with his company at the forefront of robotics and artificial intelligence, Mason often told close confidants that his proudest achievement was not the machines he built, but the family he had nurtured. Ava, too, flourished in her journey. Once a waitress barely making ends meet, she now stood as a celebrated author whose stories inspired readers across the globe. Her books were not just tales of imagination, but reflections of her own struggles, triumphs, and the quiet power of resilience. Critics praised her authenticity, and fans cherished the way she spoke directly to the heart. Together, Mason and Ava faced challenges. There were times when work threatened to pull Mason back into old habits of obsession and isolation, and there were moments when Ava questioned whether she truly belonged in the rarefied circles of wealth and power. But each trial only reinforced the strength of their bond. Mason learned to pause, to listen, to be present. Ava learned that her voice carried weight, not because of the stage she stood on, but because of the truth she spoke. Years later, their daughter Lily became a living symbol of their union. Bright, curious, and full of promise. Mason, once the boy who built robots from scraps in a junkyard, now knelt on the floor of his home, building toy robots with Lily, teaching her not only about circuits and wires, but about imagination, compassion, and courage. Ava often watched them from across the room, her heart swelling with pride at the life they had created. In the end, Mason's story was no longer just about ambition or innovation. It was about transformation, the way love can rewrite even the most solitary script. His empire would one day pass into the hands of others, his name remembered in the annals of technology, but the legacy he valued most was far more personal. The family who turned his fortress of solitude into a home filled with laughter, stories, and love. And so, the tale of Mason Aldridge reminds us that true wealth lies not in the empire one builds, but in the hearts one touches. From a lonely mogul in a towering penthouse to a husband, father, and partner in life's greatest journey, Mason's path proves that love has the power to change everything. If you followed this journey to the end, we'd love to hear your thoughts. What does true success mean to you? Share your reflections in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more stories like this. But life, as always, is not a straight line of victories. For Mason and Ava, the years that followed their marriage brought both joy and storms. Success did not shield them from the trials of being human. Mason's company, Axiom Innovations, reached global recognition. Nations sought his counsel. Corporations tried to buy influence, and journalists chased every headline about him. He was no longer just a wealthy entrepreneur. He was seen as the architect of the future. Yet, with every spotlight came shadows, criticism, envy, and immense pressure. There were whispers in the media that Ava was unworthy of her role beside him. Tabloids painted her as a woman plucked from poverty, implying she was out of place in a world of silk gowns and billion-dollar boardrooms. But Ava, with her quiet strength, never responded with bitterness. She poured her heart into her writing, letting her books answer the critics. Each story she released carried a piece of her truth. That resilience is born from struggle, and dignity is not given by wealth but by character. Lily, their daughter, grew up amidst this duality, the harsh glare of fame and the soft comfort of her parents' love. Mason and Ava shielded her as best as they could, raising her with values that echoed their own hard-won lessons. Mason taught her the importance of discipline and imagination. Ava taught her compassion, humility, and the courage to speak her truth even when her voice shook. But Mason despite his transformation, often wrestled with the ghosts of his past. Nights came when he sat alone on the balcony of their penthouse, staring out at the city skyline. The boy who had once worked with scraps to build his dreams still lived inside him, whispering fears of failure. He worried about losing what he had built, about letting down the family he loved more than life itself. Ava, ever attuned to his silences, would find him in those moments. She never scolded him for his fears, never belittled his doubts. Instead, she would sit beside him, sometimes without a word. Her presence alone reminded him of the truth. He was not alone anymore. And with her by his side, Mason always found his strength again. As years passed, Mason began to invest not just in technology, but in people. He funded schools in underprivileged areas, offering children opportunities he never had. He launched scholarships for young innovators, giving wings to those with ideas but no resources. Ava stood proudly by him at these events, often speaking to young girls about resilience, reminding them that no circumstance could change the human spirit. Their family grew into a symbol, an image of what it means to rise from struggle and transform through love. Yet behind closed doors, they remained human. They laughed together over small things. They argued, sometimes fiercely, but always reconciled with tenderness. They stumbled, but never failed to rise again, together. In time, Lily followed in their footsteps. She pursued her education with vigor, carrying both her father's brilliance and her mother's empathy. The legacy Mason and Ava built was not measured in billions or accolades, but in the values passed down to their daughter, who now prepared to carve her own path. Mason Aldridge's story, once defined by solitude and ambition, had become something much larger. It was no longer a tale of a man who built machines. It was a saga of a man who built a life worth living, brick by brick, heart by heart. And as the final chapter of his life drew nearer, Mason knew that his true empire was not the towers of glass or the wealth in his accounts. His true empire was love, messy, imperfect, enduring love, that had rewritten the course of his destiny. As Mason entered the later chapters of his life, he began to feel the weight of time. His hair, once dark and commanding, had turned silver. His steps, once brisk with urgency, grew slower but carried the quiet authority of a man who had lived fully. He was still celebrated as a titan of innovation, yet for him, titles and awards mattered less now. What mattered most were the moments, the evenings spent with Ava, the laughter of Lily echoing through their home, the simple act of holding hands with a woman who had walked with him through every storm. Ava, too, had grown in her own light. What had begun as her private writing blossomed into a respected voice. Her memoir, Through the Silent Years, became a bestseller, capturing the raw truth of her journey from poverty to love, from silence to strength. She refused to glorify their wealth. Instead, she focused on the lessons of humanity, compassion, and resilience. Readers around the world found solace in her words. Ava had become a beacon of hope for countless women who once believed their voices didn't matter. Mason often joked that while his inventions changed the world, Ava's words healed it. Deep down, he knew it was true. Technology could build bridges, but it was love and compassion that kept humanity crossing them. Lily, now a young woman, had grown into her own. She was brilliant, curious, and bold, traits that reflected both her parents. But she did not walk in Mason's shadow, nor did she merely echo Ava's voice. Lily carved her own identity. She studied environmental sciences, determined to heal the planet her father's generation had exploited in the name of progress. She told Mason once, "Dad, you built machines to change the future. I want to protect the Earth, so the future has a chance." That single sentence filled Mason with more pride than any accolade he had ever received. He realized then that his legacy wasn't only in the things he created, but in the child he raised, a daughter who carried the best of both him and Ava, yet blazed her own trail. But time, as it always does, brought trials. Ava fell ill in her mid-60s, her body weakening though her spirit remained unbreakable. Mason stayed by her side every day, refusing to leave her hospital room even when business empires demanded his presence. He sat by her bed, reading aloud her favorite poetry, brushing her hair gently, and whispering stories of their first days together as if time had folded back to those fragile beginnings. One night, as the city lights shimmered through the hospital window, Ava took Mason's hand. Her voice was faint but steady. "You gave me the life I never dreamed I could have. Not because of the wealth, Mason, but because you loved me when I didn't even know how to love myself." Mason's eyes welled with tears, but he smiled softly. "No, Ava, you saved me. You gave me a soul when I was nothing but ambition. Whatever I built, whatever I became, it was because you believed in me when I was at my weakest." She passed away quietly weeks later, leaving behind a silence so profound Mason felt as though half himself had gone with her. The world mourned the loss of Ava Aldridge, the woman who had become a symbol of strength and hope. But Mason's grief was not for the world. It was for the empty space beside him, the voice he would never hear again at dawn, the laughter that once filled his days. In the years that followed, Mason withdrew from the spotlight. He handed control of his empire to trusted partners, choosing instead to live in a quieter rhythm. His time was spent mentoring young innovators, supporting Lily's environmental projects, and revisiting the simple joys he once overlooked. Walking in the park, reading Ava's books, tending to the roses she loved. On his 82nd birthday, Lily organized a small gathering at their home by the sea. Friends, colleagues, and family gathered to honor him. Mason sat quietly, gazing out at the horizon, the sound of waves rolling against the shore. When asked to give a few words, he stood, his voice trembling yet resolute. "I once thought wealth was power, and power was everything. But life taught me that true wealth is not measured in what we own, but in who we love. My empire is not the company I built, nor the technologies I created. My empire is here," he paused, placing a hand over his heart, "in the love Ava gave me and in the hope Lily carries forward." The room fell into silence, then into applause, not for his wealth, not for his brilliance, but for the humanity he had grown into. Mason passed away peacefully 2 years later, in his sleep, with Lily by his side. In his will, he left instructions not for monuments or legacies of grandeur, but for a foundation dedicated to education, equality, and the environment. His empire dissolved into something greater than wealth. It became a lifeline for future generations. And so, the story of Mason and Ava did not end with them. It lived on in Lily, in the children who studied through their scholarships, in the women who found courage through Ava's words, and in every life touched by the quiet, enduring power of love. Their journey, once filled with struggle, rose into a testament that no matter where you come from, poverty or privilege, weakness or strength, it is love, compassion, and courage that define the true measure of a life well lived. And perhaps, for all who hear their story, a reminder remains that in the end, the greatest fortune we can leave behind is not our riches, but our humanity. After Mason's quiet passing, the world reacted with reverence. News headlines spoke of him as the architect of tomorrow and the titan who chose love over power. Yet, for Lily, it was not about the empire her father had built or the accolades people showered upon his name. For her, it was about the man who used to tuck her in at night, the father who read her mother's stories aloud when she was a child, the gentle giant whose laughter filled their home even in his old age. The grief was heavy, but Lily did not collapse beneath it. Instead, she felt something stir within her, a responsibility, almost like a flame passed down from both Ava and Mason. She knew her parents had fought battles in very different ways. Mason with innovation and vision, Ava with truth and resilience. And now, it was her turn to continue the story. She stood before the world at her father's memorial, addressing an audience that included presidents, business leaders, activists, and countless ordinary people whose lives had been touched by Mason and Ava. Dressed simply in black, her hair pinned back, she spoke not as a daughter of a millionaire, but as a voice for a new generation. "My father believed in building the future. My mother believed in healing the present. Together, they taught me that wealth without compassion is empty, and love without courage is incomplete. Today, I stand before you not to celebrate an empire of machines, but an empire of humanity, and it is our duty, not mine alone, but all of ours, to carry it forward." Her words echoed across the hall, and later, across the world. Social media lit up with her speech, calling it the dawn of the Aldridge Legacy. But Lily did not care for praise. What mattered was action. She took charge of the Aldridge Foundation, reorienting its goals to focus on environmental restoration, education for underprivileged communities, and empowerment of women worldwide. She traveled to villages where clean water was scarce, to cities choked with pollution, to schools where children still learned under broken roofs. Everywhere she went, she carried not the arrogance of wealth, but the humility of someone who understood suffering, because she had seen it in her mother's eyes and in her own childhood questions about Ava's silence. In time, Lily became known not just as Mason's daughter, but as a leader in her own right. She was invited to summits on climate change, to forums on women's rights, and to gatherings of young innovators who saw her as proof that privilege could be used for purpose. But her journey was not without obstacles. Powerful corporations stood against her, politicians dismissed her as idealistic, and media critics tried to reduce her identity to just a legacy child. Yet, whenever she faltered, Lily would return to her parents' words. She would reread her mother's memoir, finding courage in the lines about resilience. She would replay recordings of Mason's speeches, hearing his reminder that the future was never built by those who surrendered to doubt. One evening, standing at the same seaside home where Mason had once given his final speech, Lily felt the weight of both the past and the future. The waves crashed endlessly against the shore, the same waves her parents had once listened to. And in that moment, she whispered softly to wind, "Mom, Dad, I'll make sure the world remembers you. Not for your wealth, not for your empire, but for the love and humanity you gave it." Years later, Lily would succeed in ways even her parents had not imagined. Under her leadership, the Aldridge Foundation launched global green initiatives, rebuilt schools in war-torn regions, and created scholarships for young women who dreamed of leadership. Millions were lifted from despair, and countless voices once silenced began to rise. And though history books would record Mason as the tech titan and Ava as the voice of resilience, they would record Lily as the bridge between the two, the one who turned their story into a living legacy. At the centennial celebration of Mason's birth, Lily unveiled a monument, not of stone or steel, but a sprawling education campus powered entirely by renewable energy, accessible to children from every background. On its gates were etched the words Ava had once written: "True wealth is love, true power is compassion, and true legacy is humanity." The crowd stood in awe, but Lily's eyes filled with quiet tears, for she knew that somewhere in the timeless echo of love, her parents were watching. And thus, the story that began with a man of wealth and a woman of silence became something far greater, a reminder for generations to come that love, when nurtured with courage, can outlive time itself. And now, dear listener, we ask you, what are your thoughts on Mason, Ava, and Lily's journey? Do you believe love and compassion can truly reshape the world? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that inspire the heart and soul. The golden letters on the gates of the new Aldridge Education campus shimmered in the morning light. True wealth is love, true power is compassion, and true legacy is humanity. Children rushed through the gates, their laughter echoing across the massive courtyard lined with trees that had been planted by volunteers from around the world. For Lily, this was not just a school, it was a symbol, proof that change was possible when vision met courage. But as with all symbols, there were those who wished to break it. Behind the smiles and applause, there lingered whispers of resistance. Corporations threatened by Lily's environmental projects saw her as a dangerous idealist. Politicians accused her of using philanthropy as a cover for political influence. Anonymous letters arrived at her office, warning her to step back before she ruined everything. For a moment, fear gnawed at her. She had read too many stories of activist silence, of voices crushed by systems too powerful to fight. But then she remembered her mother's trembling voice in that first memoir: "Silence only empowers the oppressor." Lily resolved she would not be silent. Her journey soon took her far beyond the gates of the campus. In the drought-scorched villages of Africa, she knelt beside children whose lips were cracked with thirst, promising that her foundation would dig wells and bring water. In war-torn regions of the Middle East, she built safe schools guarded by international peacekeepers, where little girls could study without fear of bombs or bullets. In Asia, she worked with farmers to introduce sustainable farming, ensuring they could feed their families without poisoning the soil their ancestors had cherished. Each project was a victory, but each also brought new enemies. A powerful mining conglomerate tried to sabotage her clean water initiative in Africa by spreading lies that the wells were poisoned. A corrupt mayor in South America demanded bribes for allowing schools to be built. In Europe, her foundation's push for stricter climate policies earned her ridicule from seasoned politicians who dismissed her as a child playing with ideals. And yet, Lily pressed on. One night, while working late at the foundation headquarters, she received a call from her legal team. Their offices had been broken into, computers stolen, documents missing, files leaked online claiming that her foundation had ties to shady financial networks. The media storm that followed was brutal. For days, headlines smeared her name. Billionaire's daughter exposed. The Aldridge Foundation, charity or cover-up? Lily sat in her office, staring at the chaos unfolding on the screen, her hands trembling. For the first time, she felt truly alone. Her father was gone. Her mother's voice lived only in memory. And now the empire of compassion she had built was on the verge of collapse. But then, she opened the drawer of her desk. Inside was her mother's diary, the same one Ava had written in when she first entered Mason's world. She flipped to a random page and read, "There will come a day when you feel small, broken, unworthy. But remember, even a single candle pushes back the dark. And if you dare, you can become a flame that others gather to." Tears welled in Lily's eyes. That night, she made a choice. She would not hide. She would stand before the world and speak her truth, just as her mother once had. The next morning, she called a press conference. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, but Lily's voice was steady. "Yes, my father was a billionaire. Yes, I was born into privilege. But I will not apologize for using that privilege to make a difference. The documents you've seen are lies manufactured by those who fear change. They can attack me, they can attack my foundation, but they cannot attack the truth. And the truth is simple. Children need schools, families need water, the earth needs healing. That is what I stand for, and no smear campaign will change that." Her words spread across the globe. Millions watched her speech online, and instead of diminishing her, it elevated her. Donations poured in from ordinary people, single mothers, teachers, farmers, who believed in her mission. Even governments that once ignored her began to take notice. But Lily knew this was just the beginning. In the years that followed, she built alliances with activists, educators, scientists, and visionaries from every continent. Together, they formed what the media began calling the Compassion Network, a coalition of organizations dedicated to tackling the world's greatest crises: climate change, poverty, inequality. This network, however, threatened the entrenched powers of the world. Secret meetings were held among business tycoons and corrupt leaders who saw Lily as a force that could unravel their control. Some even spoke of silencing her permanently. And yet, Lily continued undeterred. Her defining moment came at the Global Summit of Nations, where she was the youngest keynote speaker. Standing before presidents, CEOs, and kings, she delivered a speech that history would remember. Too long have we measured wealth in numbers, while ignoring the lives those numbers trample. Too long have we built towers of glass, while children starve beneath their shadows. My father built machines that reshaped the world, but my mother taught me that love reshapes the soul. Today, I stand not as their heir, but as their student. And I say to you, the time of greed is ending, and the age of compassion is beginning. The hall erupted in applause. Some leaders scowled, but many others rose to their feet. For the first time, whispers of a global pact for compassion began to spread. Years passed. Lily grew older, wiser. Her hair streaked with silver, but her spirit burned as fiercely as ever. The world had not been completely healed. There were still wars, still greed, still suffering. But thanks to her relentless fight, countless lives have been saved, countless futures rewritten. On the anniversary of her mother's passing, Lily returned once more to the seaside home where it all began. She stood alone, watching the waves crash against the shore, and whispered, "Mom, Dad, I kept the flame alive." And somewhere, in the eternal silence of the sea, she felt them smiling. And so, the story that began with a wealthy man hiring a poor woman to sit across from him at dinner became something much greater. It became the story of resilience, of transformation, and of love powerful enough to change the world. And now, dear listener, we ask you, what are your thoughts on this journey? From Mason and Ava's fragile beginning to Lily's global legacy? Do you believe compassion can truly reshape the world? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel, Zimo Voice, for more stories that inspire the heart and soul. The waves lapped against the rocky shore, the same rhythm that had cradled Mason and Ava when their love story first began. Now, decades later, their daughter stood at that same spot, carrying both of their legacies within her heart. But Lily knew her story was not finished. For though her parents had given her the flame of compassion, it was her responsibility to ensure that flame did not die with her. In the years that followed her global summit speech, Lily's life became a whirlwind of battles and victories. The Aldridge Foundation expanded into nearly every corner of the world, its influence so vast that even powerful governments had no choice but to recognize it. Schools rose in the ruins of war, hospitals bloomed in places once forgotten, and renewable energy projects replaced polluted factories in struggling nations. But with every success came a new challenge. Corrupt leaders called her a puppet master. Media pundits painted her as a dreamer who courted chaos. Even some who once supported her turned away when her reforms threatened their wealth. There were threats, betrayals, and even an assassination attempt that nearly ended her life. One night, while returning from a humanitarian mission, her convoy was ambushed. Gunfire rattled the air, tires screeched, and for a moment it seemed her mission would end in blood. But Lily survived, shielded by those who believed her life meant more than theirs. She never forgot the young guard who took a bullet for her that night. His name was Arjun, and he became a symbol to her, proof that ordinary people were willing to sacrifice for a cause greater than themselves. That night changed her. She realized her foundation was no longer just hers. It belonged to the people. As the decades passed, Lily's name became a symbol. Newspapers began to call her the Mother of Compassion. Her speeches were studied in schools. Documentaries chronicled her battles with injustice, her victories, and her unshakable determination to carry forward the love story that had birthed her. And yet, she never lost her humility. Even at the height of her fame, she was often seen walking to the school she had built, sitting cross-legged with children, listening to their stories. To her, every smile, every book in a child's hands, was worth more than all the awards and accolades the world could give. She grew older. Her once dark hair turned silver, her steps slower, but her spirit remained fierce. She spent her twilight years teaching the next generation of leaders, mentoring young activists, innovators, and dreamers who came to her seeking guidance. One of them was a young woman named Amina, a refugee who had grown up in one of the Aldridge schools. Bright-eyed and determined, Amina reminded Lily of herself in her youth. Fiery, passionate, unwilling to accept silence. Lily took her under her wing, teaching her not only about leadership but about balance, about how love must always guide power. It was through Amina and others like her that Lily saw the continuation of her parents' story. She realized the Aldridge Legacy was no longer a family name. It was a movement carried by countless hearts across the world. And so, on the day of her final speech, thousands gathered, leaders from every nation, children from every school she had touched, women who once found their voices because of her, and men who once learned compassion in her presence. The hall was silent as Lily, frail but radiant, stepped onto the stage. Her voice was soft, but it carried with the weight of a lifetime. My father taught me how to build the future. My mother taught me how to heal the present. I spent my life trying to honor them both. And now, I see the future is not mine to carry. It belongs to you, to every child who picks up a book, to every mother who dares to dream for her daughter, to every leader who chooses kindness over cruelty. My time is nearly over, but yours has just begun. Promise me this. Do not let the flame die, because the flame of compassion is the only thing strong enough to outlast time. There was silence, then thunderous applause, tears streaming down the faces of those who knew they were witnessing the close of a chapter and the opening of a new one. Lily passed peacefully weeks later, surrounded by her children, grandchildren, and students. The world mourned her, but it also celebrated her. Vigils were held on every continent. Statues were not built in her honor, at her request, but forests were planted, schools expanded, hospitals opened. Her legacy lived not in stone, but in the lives she had changed. At her memorial by the sea, Amina stood where Lily once stood, where Ava and Mason had first dreamed of a future together. With tears in her eyes, she spoke to the gathered crowd. Lily Aldridge is gone, but the Aldridge legacy lives on in us. It is not a legacy of wealth or power, but of courage, compassion, and love. Let us not simply remember her. Let us become her. The waves crashed, the wind carried her words, and the crowd whispered them back. Let us become her. And thus, the story that began with a wealthy man hiring a poor woman for a dinner became something far greater. It became the story of how love defied power, how compassion overcame greed, and how one family's journey became the spark for a global movement. And now, dear listener, we ask you, what are your thoughts on Mason, Ava, and Lily's journey? Do you believe compassion truly has the power to change the world? Write your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel, Zimo Voice, for more stories that inspire, challenge, and remind us of the power of love.